to order at 7:02 p.m. Inform the public that we are returning from executive sessions with nothing to report out at this time. I'd ask everybody to join us in the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First up is the acceptance of the minutes of our last meeting. What's the board's pleasure?
So accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those are approved. Department heads, Jim Donovan, our police chief. Chief.
In the month of August, the police department responded to 1,731 calls for service. There were 629 calls via 911. There were 48 bookings. Pretty unusual. We had a big uptick in people not wanting to stop for the police. Failure to stop for the police. There was 5 just involving our department, and that doesn't count ones that came through town that we didn't get involved in. In one of the instances, so as the officer, Pat Leahy, started to chase the vehicle, sees a package come flying out the window, and that package turns out to have a loaded handgun and a bunch of drugs in it. And Pat chases this person down and chases him on foot and arrests him. Unfortunately, we had a fatal motor vehicle crash on East Britannia Street, where a 28-year-old female from Taunton passed away. It's the only vehicle involved. It was an armed robbery at the Gulf Station. Person who we're accusing of doing the robbery had done a couple in Taunton, and after coming to Raynham, we were able to arrest that person a couple days later. There was a home invasion in one of our apartment complexes. We were able to arrest somebody that night for that. We had an officer that was quarantined due to COVID restrictions with a family member that had contacted it. We had a bizarre road rage incident just a few days ago on their First Street. The 2 vehicles came in as a road rage incident with a gun involved. 2 vehicles smashing into each other, and one took off. Turned out it was actually a domestic thing, and they knew each other, but that person was arrested as well. We assisted at the murder, homicide in Taunton. Patrol officers, our officers were some of the first ones there, and our SWAT officers who are on the regional team were there as well. Our SRO did his 21st football camp for kids between 7 and 14. They had 150 kids in attendance. And we anticipate that next month, or in short order, not next month, in short order, we'll be conducting liquor stings to ensure that our liquor establishments are checking IDs and serving minors.
Thanks, Chief. Any questions?
No, I'm just curious, Chief, this is a side thing, but when you're tracking down some of these people that have committed crimes that are running out, how does the K-9 service work? Does that work? Is that helping?
Oh, yes. Yep. As a matter of fact, the package that was thrown out the window was located by our K-9 Cairo. Things like that smells like a person, human odor. So the dogs can find, our dogs can find anything we drop like that, keys, phones, things like that are evidence. So made it a lot easier for the officers to figure out what that was. And yes, the dog was used on the home invasion. The dog was deployed on the homicide shooting in Taunton to contain around the house. So yes, the dogs are out there.
So I just want it known to the citizens that our K-9 service in this town is very active and very, very helpful.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Riley, any questions?
Was the home invasion a personal situation, Chief?
As it turns out, yes, it was not a random act.
Okay.
It was,
Yeah, a
targeted.
busy month.
Yes.
Thank your department, all of the members, for everything they do. Appreciate it.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. Ed Buckley, our Highway Superintendent. Ed?
Good evening. I have some updates from the Highway Department for the summer. Last time I was in was mid-July, so we've been working right along since that time on Pleasant Street, and I'm happy to report that we're substantially, but not 100% complete. That work should wrap up by the end of this month, however. Just some detail work left to do and painting the road and that kind of thing. Hydro seeding the edges of the roads, and so we're quite far along. It's really wrapping. The next week or two, they should be pretty much all set, and then we're just waiting on the paint contractor to come in and do the whole town. Highway Department, the staff's been stretched a bit here, where we have some staff shortages with Buster being out, and also a vacant position. So we've been juggling the highway staff into the transfer station to cover those positions, and it's taken away a little bit our ability to do our normal things. However, we are still out there doing catch basin cleaning and roadside mowing and flood control when we get these heavy rains. Parking grounds, the all I can say is mow, mow, mow. They've been out with the record amounts of rain we've had. Constant mowing, extra mowing, just can't keep up with it. And I don't know if you've had any feedback on that or not, but they're doing the best they can out there. It's a bear to keep up with it this year. And last year, with the drought, everything was burnt to a crisp, and now we're not even using, for the most part, not using the irrigation systems 100%. They're also completed playground refurbishing, where they put the wood chips in for the playgrounds, special chips, and we share the cost with Park and Rec on that, and Norm and his crew get all that work done. And they're also outlining the fields for soccer events and other athletic activities, along with pruning and pruning shrubs and things like that at town facilities. Lastly, solid waste. I just want to make a few notes. Hazardous Waste Day, the second one is coming up on 9/25. We're looking to see how well received that is. The second event of the year. First year we've done 2 events, so want all the residents to know that'll be coming up quickly in the next few weeks. We've also seen an uptick in transfer station permits. I think with the change in the private hauler, there's been some dissatisfaction among a lot of the residents that have come into us and don't normally use the transfer station, are now buying permits and using our facility. So our volumes are going up. The MSW and somewhat the C&D materials, they're on the rise as far as the amount we have coming in annually. So we'll keep an eye on that. We've also got a fairly significant increase in cost for disposal. We're just starting to study this more in depth, but we look back 5 years, and just to give you a quick number check here, 2017, the cost for us to dispose of MSW was $75 a ton. It's now 97. And then for the demolition materials, it was previously 65, and that is also at 97. So I think we're going to bring some new numbers to the budget next year. We'll get by this year with what we have, but it looks like more customers and more costs in solid waste. The last thing I just want to, I know you're all aware, Mr. Glavin is here tonight, so I want to thank him prior to your comments. Thank Dennis for all the time I've worked with him here. It's been a fun thing. Dennis always brings a dry sense of humor to the department, but he's also serious about what he does, and he's participated in many snowstorms and been a valuable asset in that, and also a valuable asset for Norm and his park and grounds crew. When other staff, less experienced staff, he takes the reins when he needs to and helps get the job done. So I want to say thank you again to Dennis, and we'll miss him around the highway garage coming up shortly. I think that's it.
Thank you, Ed. If there's no objection from the board, I'll take the proclamation we have for Dennis out of order. Seeing none. Whereas Dennis Mitch Glavin has dedicated the last 30-plus years to the town of Raynham as a heavy motor equipment operator, groundskeeping HMEO, and whereas Mitch's dedication and strong work ethic have allowed a smooth operation of the highway department in the most difficult of times, and whereas Mitch's sense of humor did not go unnoticed. He could ease anyone's day and put a smile on their face with his uncensored jokes, and whereas his time and commitment to the snow and ice program had him plowing some of the largest snowstorms on record, and whereas he and his brother Brian both followed in their father Bucky Glavin's footsteps in putting their time into the town they also love, and whereas Mitch will have all the time he wants to golf in the warm weather and watch the Bruins during the cold snowstorms as he watches it fall from his living room window instead of the plow. Now, therefore, we, the Raynham Board of Selectmen, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, September 7th as Dennis Mitch Glavin Day. Mitch, do you want to come up and say anything?
Really, and just appreciated working for the town. Like you said, follow my father's footsteps and be proud of what you do.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Shivo, any comments?
No, I think it's well put, short, but to the point, and it has a lot of value. Best wishes for a very, very healthy retirement, and we look forward to seeing you from time and again around town.
I'm sure you will.
Thank you. Ms. Riley?
No, I'll just echo that. And Dennis, obviously you've got a proud family history of being involved in the town of Raynham, and we greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for everything, Mitch, and nice to see you going out healthy and happy, and so hopefully you can enjoy many well-earned years ahead of you. So wish you a lot of luck and enjoyment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care. Thank you. All right. Mitch, you definitely don't have to stay if you don't want to. I'm not going to do that to you. No appointments this evening, no public hearings this evening. Old business discussion and action, bylaw articles. I asked for this to come up tentatively at our next meeting, and we have to discuss that as well, but General Code is going to be coming in to do a presentation. But I had a few concerns with this packet that I wanted to bring to the board's attention and try to sort out some of those concerns prior to General Code coming in. First is as they were put forward to us, they're meant for October. My personal opinion is bylaws should go on the May town meeting warrant. When the fall town meeting was created, that was always created for capital items and general housekeeping. I don't know that this falls under either one of those categories. And so I would strongly suggest my colleagues join me in having this put on for May as opposed to October. The second piece is...
Can we take that as a motion?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I will move that this be set for the May meeting because it really fits the topics of that meeting. That's my move.
Okay. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion?
No.
No. Saying all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's approved unanimously. The second is when this project started, it was meant to organize and categorize our existing bylaws. I don't recall any conversation about adding to that. My recollection is at some point we were going to create a bylaw committee, and that's when proposals would come out. Yet the packet that was sent to us on Friday calls for a host of additions. First of all, a town administrator bylaw, which this board has previously said we weren't going to do when we went out and posted for it a few years ago. I don't think it's sound business practice to move forward with putting job descriptions in as bylaws because you lose the ability to make changes absent going to a town meeting. There's a personnel bylaw, same thing. These should be codified as policies. But in addition to that, and most concerning to me, in the general bylaws, there's a proposed section that would effectively eliminate this board's ability to talk to our town employees. Section 84-4F. It says that the Board of Selectmen or its members shall deal with town officers, department heads, and employees who are subject to the direction and supervision of the town administrator solely through the town administrator, and neither the Board of Selectmen nor its members shall give orders to any such officer or employee, either publicly or privately. And I'm left to wonder the motives on this, and I'm not going to speculate, but what I can say is when we run for office, we don't forego our rights as taxpayers to talk to whomever we want, and our employees who are residents don't forego their constitutional rights to talk to their elected officials. To me, this was a misguided power play or somebody's naive understanding of municipal government, but I can tell you that not only was I significantly offended by this, I was concerned by this. I think this is ripe for legal challenge by the ACLU because you're infringing upon a person's rights. When I took a con law class, the professor basically said that a person's constitutional rights end the moment they infringe upon somebody else's. Well, it's my belief, it's my opinion, that if this article were to move forward, it would infringe upon my constitutional rights as a taxpayer in the town of Raynham. And I would urge my colleagues to join me in removing the administrator's bylaw, the personnel bylaw, and that section. In addition, I spoke to the town moderator, and I asked the town moderator if this was his request, and he said it wasn't, but the conversation about requiring town meetings to be held on Saturdays, I don't know about the two of my colleagues, but I have regularly gotten complaints about elections being on Saturdays. And so to try to move a town meeting to a Saturday blows my mind. The moderator said he did not ask for this. It also takes our state statute authority of setting the town meeting date away from us and gives it to the town moderator, who again said he did not ask for this. So I'm left wondering why that would happen. It's just, again, perplexing to me, it's confusing to me, and quite frankly, it's alarming to me, in part because I had no knowledge of it until last week when we got this, but more so because this board didn't ask for this. We, I thought, had a consensus as to what we were going to do. The first part was meant for housekeeping. The second part, when this board empowered a committee to do its work, would come forward with bylaw recommendations. And now these have been sent to town council. So if town council has started reviewing it, the taxpayers have incurred more of their dollars being wasted by something that the board did not direct, and in one instance has already said we weren't going to do. And so to me, it's a misuse of taxpayer funds as well, and again, equally concerning.
So if I may, Pat, or you
No, go ahead.
okay. I'm comfortable with putting off the presentation of the bylaws and the warrant till May, because that's where they belong for sure. Any article or any section such as 84 dash I'm sorry,
-4 -F.
dash 4 dash F dash 4 dash F that doesn't resonate well. I mean, it does put a limit on the interaction that we would expect, for the, between the board and the rest of the town system and structure. So I'm comfortable with that. If we're going to talk, I would suggest we postpone the bylaws on the town administrator, and we focus on the job description of the town administrator, which I really think is the backbone of the position. I mean, the job description, we don't have bylaws on any other contract position that I'm aware of. Do we?
The only bylaws that speak to are the ones that the state law requires, for example, animal control. There's nothing like this on the bylaws.
Well, so I think the emphasis ought to be on the job description and making sure the job description fully represents the range of duties that are expected. I mean, that's the way we handle all the other contract positions, with the exception that you mentioned. So I just think that the board ought to move forward and vet the job description and see that the job description matches the things that we're expecting. And I'm not sure that's the case. We could ask the town administrator how he feels about that, but that would be my perspective on this.
Ms. Riley?
Where did these come from, Mr. Chairman? Is this
The
from
town administrator.
Okay. So did you say the general law was going to give us a review of the
So
bylaws?
general code is
General
supposed
code.
to give us a thing, but that's the other piece that I wanted to bring up. They're asking for it to be remote participation. I told the town administrator he couldn't authorize that, that this board had eliminated it, and the board can obviously do whatever they want, but I think it's a slippery slope to start granting remote participation to certain parties and not others. We made the conscious decision to go back to original operations, and I think it's extremely concerning if you would start carving out exceptions to that.
Maybe if we moved forward with listening to general code and take that aspect of it and sort of table the rest of this?
I'm absolutely fine moving forward with what the original charge was, which was to clean them up and get them organized and reduce duplication. I would ask the board, I can't make a motion, but I would ask the board to strike completely the TA one, the personnel one, and those two sections that I referenced regarding town meeting and regarding the ability of this board to do its job.
The motion I would make at this point for discussion is that we eliminate all of those except for the town administrator bylaws, with the understanding that we review the job description and see where there is any opportunity to improve it. But we do not approve any of these at this point. that we proceed with reviewing the job description, seeing how it relates to or synchronizes with these bylaws. But the other three I have no problem with at all. And I'm not approving the bylaws for the town administrator. I'm merely saying, let's use that as a backdrop for looking at the job description.
I just got a copy of these on Friday, and there's a lot here, as you mentioned, and I really certainly would want to put a lot more time into looking into this before I certainly would approve anything. So at this point, I would be happy with tabling this, certainly. I'm not supportive of anything here at this point, for sure.
Okay, so is that a second to the motion?
What was your motion again, Mr. Shavo?
I knew you were going to say that. The first three items, the specific items, 84-4F, and the other two, I would make a motion to eliminate those. They really do limit the board's ability to interact with the community. I would avoid at this point of eliminating those that relate to the town administrator at this point, because I would like to use that as a template to see where, if anywhere, we could enhance and qualify the job description. So we'd use that kind of as a way to do that. I would not eliminate it at this point. I would use that as a tool. The third thing I say is that I definitely agree that whichever one of these bylaws passes, whether it's the town administrator or not, that move to October for sure. We don't have time.
You mean
I
May?
mean May. Sorry. Gee, that's
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those are approved. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah.
Just so the board knows, General Code is based out of Rochester, New York. If they cannot, they've already indicated that they can't attend next week in person. They could only do by phone. If the board is unwilling to do by phone, then I'd be afraid that they can't talk to the board.
What was the terms of their contract that we signed? Did it require them to come on site?
I don't think so, but I can double check.
Well, I would think double check, and where we just voted to move it till May, I don't think it's a pressing issue to have them in next week. So that should give them ample time to book a plane flight down or a train ride down.
Okay, I'll check with them on that as well.
bicycle.
All right, new business, discussion and action, presentation, Collins Center classification and compensation study. Mary, I see you are with us. Come on up, Mary.
How y'all doing tonight?
Good, yourself?
Oh, I'm fabulous.
Thanks for joining us from Boston.
What, from Shrewsbury?
Almost as far as New York, Mary.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a train. I can take it.
Yeah.
I can make it to your meetings, you know. No, happy to be here. It's really your pleasure. I believe you've all received the report. I'll just go through it quickly and then answer any questions you have. It's very self-explanatory. First of all, I want to start by commending the town. When I think about the work that you all have undertaken in the past year, you know, the organizational studies, the DLS study, you've done policies, and we're going to be doing some training out of that project. And now we're doing the classification and compensation for really your key department heads and your key positions. So what I want to do is this is a fairly straightforward process to do a classification and compensation study. So the main thing is in classification is to have an accurate position description. So you're just speaking about the town administrator position. Without the right job description, nobody knows what their roles and responsibilities are, and it's really critical to have that done. So what we did is, and my colleague Libby, who you've met before, did many of these interviews. We gave each person, and we were focusing on those positions that had the individual contract, because they're the ones who, unlike union positions, have not had their compensation looked at. One thing that's unique about them is that they have a set rate of pay, and it really is a function of when they were hired and what the market was at the time. And I'm not saying there's no rhyme or reason, but there is no system. So, and certainly when you deal with things like the Mass Equal Pay Law and things like that, you want to be sure that you have a system. So the way you start with a system is to do an accurate job description. They were each given a comprehensive questionnaire. They all filled it out. We learned about their job in that way. We compared it to an existing job description, some of which were really just job postings, not job descriptions. So we generated and created new position descriptions for all these positions. We interviewed each person so that we had a full understanding of the context of their job. Some people write differently. Some people write in bullet points. Some people write in pages. So we do the interview so that we really get the feel of it and the relationship. So often when you do a classification study, it's about the equity within an organization more than it is outside. People have this justice issue, and there's a morale issue if people are not classified appropriately. So the way we created the job descriptions is that we had the meeting, we had the questionnaire, we did a draft, the employees and the town administrator and the HR manager all reviewed the drafts and they were finalized. Once that's done, we evaluate the positions based on a rating system. So you can see on page 3 of the report, it tells you the factors that we evaluate. This is a standard system that all classification systems use. Sometimes there's nuances of one category or another, but what determines the, quote, relative value of a position, and remember, we're not talking about the value of people, we're talking about the positions. It has nothing to do with the incumbents of the job. How independent is the position? Do they have statutory authority? What education do they need? What are the physical requirements? A lot of what happens in these job descriptions is dictated by the Americans with Disabilities Act, which says you have to have a job description that people can do with or without an accommodation. So you see that the position descriptions have the physical requirements, what is the work environment, those sorts of things. So what happens after you do this evaluation, it's numerical. We don't call it a true science because there's an art and there's judgment in it, but it is a point factor analysis with a matrix. So then what we do is we compare the positions, and you'll see on the table on page 3 the 5 groupings we came up with, whether we're going to call them grades or not. So when you evaluate these positions based on their authority, their judgment, their scope, their complexity, we came up with 5 grades, and you can see them there listed. Then what we do, once we figure out who should be in the same pay range, we did a market survey. So now what's interesting about you all, because people have only one set of pay, it's hard to know and evaluate whether that is the minimum pay for their job or the maximum pay for their job. If they're a new employee, maybe it's the minimum, but maybe it's the maximum because you had to recruit them in because of the market. So it's a little challenging to only have one rate of pay, because what that does is it doesn't capture the full market. It's a moment in time. So what we were able to do is do a survey, and you can see the towns that responded. 13. We had 13 towns respond to the survey, which is a very good sample. To get 13 municipalities during COVID to respond to a survey was great. And what we found, which is typical when we have a single pay, all of the pays are within the market range. Many were above the minimum of the range, which would make sense because if people have been in their job for a while, they should be above the minimum of the market. Some were below the maximum, though. So when you see, we'll go through the survey, we use an hourly rate, especially in this region. There are many different hours of work. Some municipalities are 35, some are 37 and a half, some are 40, some are based on, being salaried. We use the hourly so that we can compare apples to apples. So what we do if you want to look at the survey summary, that would be on page 6. You can see in the parentheses on the far right column, you'll see Raynham minus the average maximum and Raynham minus the median maximum. We did not evaluate the minimum because you don't really have a minimum other than for people who are new in their job. So you'll see most of your, half of your salaries are both above or within or near the maximum and the median. And we use the median and the average so that we get rid of the outliers in the median, and then we're able to evaluate the average. So it does capture both sides of that fence. So there's a handful of positions that are particularly below what the market is, but you have to remember, it's because you don't have a range, this is the current pay being below the maximum of the range. Just because they're below the maximum doesn't mean they're not in the range. For example, when you see something, your Parks and Recreation Director, for example, you'll see $5 below and $4 below. But the current pay of the Parks and Recreation Director is within the range. We're just not showing you the minimum here. So don't be alarmed by those brackets. There's nobody that was so far below the market that you need to do catch up, for example. So what we are recommending, based on the averages, we're recommending you can either decide whether you want to use ranges. We're recommending for your purpose or your deliberation is a step system. It makes it easier to administer. People can have expectations. Whether you want to tie increases to performance appraisal, that's a policy decision for you to make. So we're recommending, the way we did it is we took the average and median maximum and subtracted 30%, because a range should be the average, a typical range is 25 to 30%. So you'll see that most of the minimum pays that we're recommending are below what people are actually making, which makes sense because they've been in their job for a while. So, and you'll see that the maximum pay we're recommending does not align with what the maximum is in the market. We've adjusted to your municipality. For example, if you look at, I'm going to use the town administrator because he can handle it. If you look at the average and the median maximum, the market out there right now, the maximum pay for a town administrator is around $80, $80 to $83 if you're average and median. We're not saying the pay for the town administrator should be that, but we're saying the range going forward should be 62 to 81. So that shows you there's growth to get to that maximum, because most of your people should be somewhere in the middle of the range. So it will take you a while to digest this, but in terms of cost impact, say you were going to adopt this for January 1, it's minimal cost impact because everybody is falling within that range. So it's just about getting a system for you. The one recommendation we had, and again, this is, while Libby is an attorney, she doesn't act as an attorney in her role with us, and I'm not an attorney, but have extensive experience in this. We do recommend you get a legal opinion on the issue of the individual contracts. The statutes are a little muddy, but in most places, only town administrator, police, fire can have individual employment contracts. Now, the argument is usually that, well, then how do we give them benefits? You usually have a personnel policy that dictates benefits for non-union employees. So we do recommend you take a look at that, because you want to be sure. You have 21 individual contracts is a lot, and there should be a system in place for fairness and equity. And you don't want to be in a position out of, the way it's always been done is individual contracts. But you want to be sure that you're being consistent and treating new employees and current employees on a consistent manner. That doesn't mean you can't have differences, but you want to have some sort of system or policy in place. That is my quick overview. I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Shivo, any questions?
Yes, Mary, my first question is, when you establish this pay range, and I don't have a list of the communities that you referred to, I'm not sure.
It's in here on
Page 4.
Did I miss it?
Avon, Bridgewater, Easton, Lakeville, Mansfield, Norfolk, Rehoboth, Seekonk, Somerset, Swansea, Taunton, and West Bridgewater responded. We had a few municipalities not respond,
Yeah.
but with 13,
Okay, yeah,
that's
they're in the, I
a
thought
pretty
they were
good
in a
pool.
table.
Yeah.
So my question is this: how can we compare the pay for somebody here in Raynham to somebody in Taunton, which is 2-3 times the size? And for example, we just had one of our individuals leave here, who was making what we thought was a reasonable, pay, and they moved to a larger town. I'll put it on the record, Fall River, and they're making 50% more because of the town size, which
Right, right.
So there are other variables here, Mary. But certainly one is the number of years' experience. Certainly one is the size of the town, and I don't know. I mean, are there other variables we should be considering? Have you considered variables like the size of the town?
Sure, and certainly, when you do a market survey, think of it in terms of not comparable municipalities, but your exact point is, where are your employees willing to travel to? That is your market. Now, Fall River was not in this. There were some that would be so, in the Metro West, everybody wants to be compared to Cambridge and Brookline. We don't use Cambridge and Brookline. Or everybody in the West wants Amherst, or Northampton. We don't use that. When you see these are fairly consistent sized municipalities. But when you think about, and not to bring up, a happy subject, a town clerk is a town clerk is a town clerk, right? The statutory authorities are the same everywhere. So now ability to pay isn't necessarily part of the market. It's what is that job worth? And those larger ones get thrown out by doing the median, which is why we're able to come up with a decent pool. So these ranges are based on this pool. In some, your positions came below, but in others they didn't. So I think you're right in the mix with the market. You're not going to compete with some towns.
Well, there are other variables, and
Yeah.
I understand your point, but we've had people leave, because the difference in money was more than enough to make up for the trip, the other 20
Right.
minutes on the road. But another variable that concerns me is you take a particular job, what is the supply, of that some positions, the supply is a lot less, available than other positions. And so to the extent that there's a supply-demand dissonance, you're going to get a lot more competitive, bidding. And that's something that we're faced in some of these, municipal positions where you go out, you look, and there's five communities that are looking for the same position. They're all looking for a finance director.
Yeah.
So what do? We're bidding. It's like bidding on a house. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm not sure that falls into the mean, median, other mode.
Well, what it does fall into, and you're absolutely right, what it falls into is that we value a position on a range. So where that would be, you're absolutely right. Finance, so many positions right now are hard to fill because of the shifting demographics. But you may need to pay near the top of the range for a finance position. The reason you want a system with grades and ranges is also for the Massachusetts Pay Equity Act. You have an obligation, and I don't believe, by doing this, you are addressing some of the issues of the Mass Pay Equity Act by saying what positions are comparable. And some, and the reason the Pay Equity Act came out was because of traditionally female-held jobs with the same level of responsibility are historically in the market paid less. So by creating a grade structure, like we've done, of grades 1 through 5, we're saying these positions should be paid the same. Everybody in this grade, that grade. Now, if recruitment efforts are such that you have to pay, you can pay at the minimum for some jobs and you have to pay at the maximum for others, that's okay, it's still within the range. We just don't want you to have any sort of claim that, oh, this job is historically male or female and therefore we can pay them less or more. By creating this system, you're in better stead for that. You're right, the market does dictate. IT jobs is another one.
One other question, Mr. Chair, if I may. Mary, do you have a recommendation as to how often we should, evaluate the market? In other words, the market changes.
Yes,
and
it does.
So in 6 months, these numbers could be different because, the dynamics out there have changed. So do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, so we do recommend that you do this sort of survey. You don't need to reclassify into the grades. Those should serve you well unless you're significantly changing a job.
Okay.
But you should do a survey every 3 to 5 years, just to take the temperature of what's out there. And you'll know that because you have lost a few people because of wages in other places. So by having a range, you can sort of do a course correct as you look at it. One of the things that we mention in here is coming up with a policy on how you move people, how you place people on the scale. You may want to use somebody's longevity as a reason to put them further down the range than at the beginning of the range. You might want to use years of service. You have some newer employees who really should be at the lower end of the pay grade.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What are the steps based on, Mary? You have 12 steps here.
That is a best practice recommendation of 2.5% for a step. Now, many places have 3%. We don't recommend 3% steps because then if you're ever giving any sort of across the board, it can get more costly. Some do smaller across the boards. That would be determined each year when you do your budget. So you may say the CPI is 0.001, so we're only going to give a step. Some municipalities don't go with steps, they go with just the range, so they can be more flexible within that. That's your policy decision. We gave you an example of what a pay range with steps would look like. Some like steps because then it takes the debate out of it. Others don't like the steps because it's viewed as guaranteed and automatic. That again, it sounds like I'm dancing. It really is the policy decisions. We've had some municipalities split it out to be 15 2% steps so that there can be the ability for a merit increase and a cost of living. Those are the kinds of things you want to consider. Somerville, when we did it, did 1.5, 21.5 steps, I think, but they built in a system that if you exceeded performance, you would get 2 steps. So it really is, they're a much larger place and had a lot more calculation time. We recommend keeping it fairly simple. You could change it to be, 12 or 15 2% steps and then consider an across-the-board increase. But by doing an across-the-board increase, what you're doing is you're raising the whole scale.
Yeah.
So for a few years, you wouldn't necessarily need to do a cost of living. You could just give the steps. You might make a policy if somebody is at the maximum that you could do something different with the cost of living, but none of your current people would be at the maximum under this recommended range. We do that on purpose to give you room to grow. Now, my example of the town administrator, the maximum But again, the minimum is much lower than the maximum. So the maximum is 80,000. That will still serve you well in a year from now. You don't need to add 2% to that each year, because then you end up inflating,
Right.
compressing against the market and what your across the board is. And you
Thank
don't
you.
need to treat it like your unions either, you know.
Okay. Thank you. Certainly a lot of very helpful information here. Appreciate it.
Mary, a couple questions for you.
Sure.
I appreciate that you noted the varying work week schedules, because that's something that I felt delineates us from other communities where we close at noon on Fridays. And so it's nice to see it in writing. It's also nice to see in writing that you, and I'm quoting you, say, in most comparisons, Raynham salary is higher than the average, because I think that flies in the face of some of the stuff that some people choose to articulate, which is that we underpay in Raynham. So your unbiased third-party study says that's not the case. But I am curious about one thing. When you talk about these salaries, do you know, is it the numbers that they gave you base pay or total compensation? Because as you know, with contracts, because you saw our contracts, for example, staff have stipends, and I know that happens in other communities. So are we looking at the salary, or are we looking at the salary and stipends for total comp?
Our survey was the hourly rate of the base. So again, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what we got from other municipalities. What you will need to decide is, are the stipends really part of their job, and we should add that when we decide where to place them? Are you getting rid of stipends and rolling them in? That's something you would want to consider. I do know some stipends, and we see this quite a bit. I'm going to use the town clerk as an example again. In some municipalities, there's the ability to give a stipend or a flat amount if you're certified. I know that's true for treasurer, collector, those sorts of things. Now, the question is that really part of the base? Because if you hired somebody without it, would you roll that in or not? So should you keep that separate? Many towns, most, keep that separate. Now, that's different than if you have, let me use an example from another municipality. We have a general foreman in a town who also serves as part of his regular job is to do tree work. Well, that's not warranting of a separate tree warden stipend, but in some places it really is a different job. Usually, if it's work that can be done during the regular course of the day, that's really a differential, not a stipend, and is that part of the job? So long as you have classified the position appropriately. Sometimes stipends are given as a way not to upgrade a job. So you have to be true to the classification system.
Okay, thank you. The only other, it's not so much a question, but a statement, and you touched upon it when you were answering one of Ms. Riley's questions, but to me, you talk about equity. Our unions have 6 steps. I think to introduce 12 steps for department heads creates a significant inequity and not an appropriate inequity. And so that would be a concern that I have. 12 steps to me, when you talk about making it simple, is onerous and a little excessive.
It all depends on how you want to approach it. I mean, I would ask, and I put my foot in my mouth, they have 6 steps. What is the percentage between them?
I think it's about 3%.
5 to 7.
It's 5%?
Some are 5, some are 7.
Some are 5 and some are 7, and are those grids increased within across the board?
Yeah, by position, you mean?
Yeah,
Like a 1% or 2% on July 1? Or did they just get their steps?
across
No, across the board too.
So that's 8% a year. That's a very healthy increase, which also is probably why you need a system. You know, what you could do is convert just to ranges and have it be, because 6% at 5, that's a very broad range then. It must be close to 40%. Or step 1 to step 6, so there's really only 5 at 5%. So it might be 25 to 35. But that's, and then they're maxed out and frustrated after 6 years because they're sitting there. And then you're paying longevity, most likely.
Yeah, some of the
Yeah.
unions have longevity, not all of them.
Yeah, so these are the kinds of things that you want to say, and so often, and you bring up a very good point, the people leading our organizations don't have the same benefits of the people they're leading. So you may want to take a look at that and see the ranges. We've recommended decent ranges for these positions. So you may want to say, instead of 2.5, we want to go with 4, but then we wouldn't do an across the board. But then you're going to get people closer to the maximum sooner than later, but that's okay. And you can build in other things. And if you're doing a survey every few years, you can adjust them.
Sure.
So it depends on which way you want to go. A smaller step and an across the board. The across the board helps people who are at maximum. The steps help people who are at minimum. So you want that right blend.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I think the right blend, though, too, is not overextending the town. I mean, and I've always said this, when we had the Great Recession, we were the only town in the Southeast who didn't do layoffs, and we're a pension liability. And so even though I can appreciate you saying there's limited impact now, there's impact down the road on the taxpayers with the pension liability, and I think that's an obligation that the board has as well to consider.
Sure, and what I recommend as you're digesting this is to take a look and see that the recommended ranges from us, and this is where it's an art, not necessarily a science, is taking into consideration some of the things you said about we're not the towns that have all that money. So we didn't say this town needs to be at 80% of the market. You have got that flexibility.
Good. Thank you, Mary. Appreciate
Sure.
it. Anybody else good? All right.
No,
Great.
All right, if you
Thank you.
digest and have further questions, just be in touch, where to find me.
Perfect. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, congratulations on all the hard work you've done as a town this past year.
Thank you for your help.
We certainly love coming in, so.
Thank you.
Take care.
Next on the new business, I asked for this to be on the agenda, allocation of free cash to the Public Safety Building Fund. We last year did half of that, and I would request the board do that again this year. As I said a few weeks ago, even though the override passed, we can still reduce what that cost was projected to be on the taxpayers by allocating free cash to reduce that, and I would strongly urge the board to go that route. I think we owe it to the taxpayers.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll make a motion that we transfer 50% of the free cash as we did last year to the public safety building project.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly support the concept. Have you checked at all, and I would assume that you have with our finance director, our finance committee, just to make sure that we're safe taking that action? I know we have some increases in our budget this year that we didn't have in the past.
Well, free cash is never used for the budget. Free
Right.
cash is used for one-time expenses, and I don't know that we would need to use free cash to offset the budget based upon new growth, and I would never vote for that because it's the cardinal rule number 1 in public budgeting not to use one-time revenue for
So
it.
you're comfortable that we can financially take
I'm
this move?
extremely comfortable about it because, again, as we've seen, when free cash is there, capital will spend whatever is available. And not that those projects are not worthwhile or needed, but I think the higher priority has to be doing right by the taxpayers.
Oh, absolutely, and certainly it's a well-supported use of those funds with the support of our voters at the special election, so.
Yeah, and in the entire project, if I may,
Yes.
was based on a certain amount of free cash being applied to the amount that was approved by the residents. So it really goes very hand in hand with the overall game plan.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That is approved. Thank you. Next up is discussion and action fall town meeting. 2 dates were proposed. One of them, October 25th, the moderator can't attend. As I said earlier, my comments don't support Saturday, so I would propose Monday, November 1st, keeping with the Mondays, which is something that we've always done. And I think that gives our finance director enough time because he was asking for it later in October. So I don't think between that Saturday and Monday there would be significant consequence. Good with you, Chris? Wonderful.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That is so voted. Next up, and we're going to take it in 2 parts. We have received the resignation of our health agent. Dear Board, it's with a heavy heart that the purpose of this letter is to give my resignation as health agent for the town of Raynham, effective September 19. After serious consideration, I've accepted the position working for a regional health alliance. Working as Raynham's health agent has given me invaluable knowledge and experience, and for that I am very grateful. I wish nothing but the best for the Board of Health in the town of Raynham, and if I can be of any assistance to you at any time in the future, please don't hesitate to contact me. Matt Tanis. What's the board's pleasure on that?
Motion to accept with regret.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and can I also have a motion to post the vacant position?
So moved.
Yeah.
All right, do I have a motion and do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That is great. Next up is discussion town report dedication. I think that's you, Ms. Riley.
Yes, and I thank you for adding that to the agenda, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman. I know normally we determine who the town report is going to be dedicated to in March or April, but we have a special event coming up this Sunday. Friends and family members of Marie Smith are having a celebration of her efforts over the years on the occasion of her retirement. Marie is one of those people that's really legendary in our town. First woman ever elected to the Board of Selectmen, served 18 years on the Board of Selectmen, 9 years on the Finance Committee, almost 30 years on the Business and Economic Development Commission, and certainly, and so many other committees that she served as well. And prior to all of that, she served in the Treasurer's office here in the town of Raynham. So Marie has done so much that I just thought if you two would support that, would be appropriate at this time to make a motion that we dedicate the 2021 annual town report to Marie Smith.
Okay, is that a motion?
You please.
Yes, I happened to have served with Marie many years ago. I hate to tell you how many, on the Finance Committee. So we go back that far, and I think that her years of service are well deserving of the recognition that you're recommending. So I would certainly second your motion.
Thank you.
I likewise have no issues, and I think it's been a tradition where we honor selectmen once they choose to move on from that position, and I think it's a worthwhile tradition that is should be considered. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Thank
that
you.
is approved. Thank you. Town Administrator's report, Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ongoing business includes the Community Services Director search. The search committee will be convening its first meeting tomorrow afternoon. There was a robust number of applicants, which will hopefully lead to an exceptional candidate for the position. The fall town meeting capital budget process. Department heads are working on compiling their budgets, and the chairs of the Finance and Capital Committee have been contacted to set meeting dates. The committee chairs, Finance Director, and I will be working collaboratively this year to put together a capital budget in absence of our treasurer collector. And then upcoming, Mr. Chairman, the next regularly scheduled meeting for the Board of Selectmen is Tuesday, September 14th, 2021 at 7 p.m. right here in the Don McKinnon Meeting Room of Town Hall, 558 South Main Street, Raynham, Massachusetts. The public will be able to participate by watching the Raynham Channel on Verizon, Comcast, or recording posted on later on YouTube. That is all I have, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any questions or comments.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Shiva?
None, thank you.
Ms.
No,
Riley?
I have none. Thank you.
Great. Selectmen's report, Mr. Shiva.
Yes, just one thing, Mr. Chair, and that is that last meeting, we had some input from our chief of the fire department, Chief Lasavita, and he noted with great pride that the fire department has secured a very, very sizable program, amount of money for additional help and so forth grant. And I would like to motion to the board, or make a motion to the board, that we recognize the individuals specifically that applied for and successfully received that grant. I don't have their names in front of me, but I think it's appropriate that the community have that. So that's my motion.
Okay.
I will second that.
Okay, and just for the record, it's Lieutenant Carnes and Firefighter Alexander.
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, that's approved. Anything else, Mr. Shiva?
None, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Riley.
Just want to mention it's back to school and to send out a congratulations and thank you, heartfelt thank you to all of our educators in all of our schools that serve our Raynham students for all that they do to educate, inspire our young people. And I don't think it's said often enough, but they are heroes in our community and we appreciate it.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Riley. No members of the press present. Emergency business, is there any?
None, Chair.
They have none.
Okay. Citizen and community input, any? No? Okay. Performance of the administrative duties, I'll entertain a motion to approve the Raynham invoice and payroll warrants.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's
Aye.
approved. I'll entertain a motion for Raynham police invoice and
So
payroll warrants.
moved.
Second.
And I will call for a roll call. Mr. Shiva?
Aye.
Ms. Riley?
Aye.
And I will abstain. That passes. If there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.